Why, hello there and welcome to Elden Ring So Far, where we have a lot to talk about. On August 25th, the opening night of Gamescom 2021, a select group of journalists and creators got to watch a 17-minute demo of Elden Ring gameplay, as well as ask Fromsoftware's marketing director Yasuhiro Kitao a few questions each. The embargo lifted on Friday and we got a flood of impressions. I have since read and watched every scrap of information that has come out, and I'm happy to report that every impression included at least one unique piece of information, and that I've compiled it all into this one video. While the demo footage has not been released publicly yet, a number of new screenshots were dropped and I will show all of them in this video. As I mentioned at the top, the demo was 17 minutes of pre-recorded footage that contained various segments of gameplay. The demo footage was likely captured on PC, and reports of performance were positive overall, with the demo running at 60 frames per second according to the Washington Post. And with that, let's get into it. Let's start with the biggest shakeup to the formula, the open world. The open world of the Lands Between contains enemy and boss encounters, plants and animals to harvest, access to 6 main enclosed dungeons called Legacy Dungeons, and access to countless smaller dungeons. While there is a recommended path to take through the world, you are free to tackle the game in almost whatever order you choose, although Game Informer confirmed you will not be able to go straight to the final dungeon like in Breath of the Wild. In the Verge article, FromSoft marketing director Yasuhiro Kitao explained the development of the open world. When we first set out, we knew we wanted to create a very large world and have that interspersed with these legacy dungeons, that sort of structure. But we thought the overworld would become a lot more flat and plain, and be there to connect these dungeons. As we built it out, we learned that we wanted the Lands Between to have a lot more character and a lot more verticality, and more intricate design. So we ended up handcrafting a lot of this map and trying to make it as interesting to explore as possible. I think it's interesting that the open world really did start as this negative space between dungeons, which touches upon some of the Shadow of the Colossus inspirations mentioned by Insider Omnipotent on Reset Era. But I'm very happy the direction the development went, because the verticality seen in the screenshots is phenomenal. I have this shot as my computer background, and every morning when I get on, I can't help but spend a moment to explore the image and imagine all of the little secrets and encounters tucked into the landscape. Speaking of exploration, Kitao elaborated to Eurogamer a bit more on From's goal with the exploration in the open world. The Lands Between is truly dense with dangers and secrets, and our aim is for the player to make these discoveries and have these chance encounters just through the act of exploring. A big question when talking about exploration and moving through the world is checkpoints and discovery and how those work, and the demo provided a ton of information there. Vadi explained in his video that the checkpoints in Elden Ring are called Sites of Lost Grace. Lost Graces in Elden Ring function most similarly to bonfires in Dark Souls 1. Resting at a Lost Grace replenishes your health, refills whatever Estus-like healing system is in Elden Ring, and ties you to that Lost Grace in the world. You can also change out weapon skills and spirit summons, 2 systems I will talk about in greater detail later. At Lost Graces you can summon Melina, the robed NPC we have seen previously. In the demo, when summoned she removes her hood to reveal strawberry blonde hair and 1 golden eye, her other eye shut tight, and a tattoo over it that could resemble a dragon. You can level up with her, making her something of the Maiden in Black or Firekeeper of Elden Ring. However, Kitao explained to Eurogamer that she is not quite like the Firekeeper of previous games. He said, "Whereas before these characters were generally reserved and quiet characters, Melina has got her own ambitions and her own big place in the story, so we hope you enjoy that aspect of it." In addition to being a place of respite, Lost Graces also provide guidance for those seeking it. They emanate a gentle ray of light that points you towards your next main objective. You don't have to follow it, but there is a diegetic helping hand for those who might want it. Lost Graces will be less frequent than bonfires in Dark Souls, but their spacing and frequency is still something From is working on. Kitao said to The Verge, "We're currently in the middle of fine-tuning the pacing and tempo of what you run to out in the overworld." With the world as large as it is, From has worked hard to provide an open world rife with exploration while also not making it tedious. Fall damage has been reduced from the Souls games, and a dedicated jump button has been added. You can get health back by defeating enemies out in the world in a system that sounds similar to the Ring of the Evil Eye from Dark Souls. Another quality of life addition is that you can fast travel at any time to a site of lost grace that you have visited. Keep in mind you might not want to do that as they will be further apart, but it does provide you the option to nope out of an area. There is another system currently in development that Catal mentioned to The Verge. One thing we did was, in an area with a high level of challenge, we placed these retry points. That's still a tentative name, and if the player finds that, they'll have the option when they die of respawning from the retry point or the last checkpoint. This is actually a system I theorized about, and I think it's a nice addition. It does not seem like you'll be able to fast travel from them, or access Melina, or utilize the features of a Lost Grace, but it provides the option to skip backtracking at a time when you are dead set on getting through a challenge. In his video, Vaati confirmed that there is a hub, and that it is this cozy Arthurian space plus crypt shown here. We don't know much about this hub right now, but we do know that NPCs you meet will come here, and that this is a place of respite for the player. So, what will you be doing out in the world at any given moment? This was a big question I had, and this demo crafted an answer. Elden Ring will feature the collection of resources like plants and animal hides and meat as part of its crafting system. You will use these collected resources to craft things like arrows and food using recipes that you find out in the world. Fromsoftware stressed that vendors will still provide items, and this is presenting players another option. We've seen plants throughout the gameplay trailer that look usable for crafting, and in the demo they showed sheep, deer, and eagles as just a few of the animals you can hunt for resources. There were a couple of recipes mentioned by Catal, such as different types of arrowheads with different effects, as well as dried meat that provides increased stamina recovery. But what good are arrows and dried meat without the need to use them in combat? The world of Elden Ring will feature a variety of enemy encounters. There are typical groupings of enemies that you will come across, and much more. The caravans we've seen in the gameplay trailer will move around the world and were featured multiple times in the demo. Game Informer spoke about an instance of the player sneaking by a caravan as it stopped, and the enemies fanning out to protect it. The player returned at nightfall to use the increased stealth of nighttime to tackle the challenge on better terms. This is a cool way to demonstrate the role of the day-night cycle as well, and how it can feature into handling the open world. In addition to groups of enemies, there are also bosses called field bosses out in the open world. In the demo, they showed an extended look at a fight with a wyvern seen in the gameplay trailer, as well as a fight with this character from the concept art. These battles sound very dynamic, and I'd like to quote a passage from the Eurogamer article describing the wyvern fight. We stay on horseback, firing what look like soul arrows at the dragon as it wheels around and crashes to the ground again. The demo shows multiple ways of attacking the creature, including on foot with melee weapons as it sets the ground alight. But the most impressive clip shows the player riding around the dragon on our spirit steed as it breathes fire in a wide arc. The player rides in underneath the dragon's wings to attack its neck safely from the side. There's also a moment where the dragon is stunned while the player is attacking on foot, allowing them to get in for a critical, stabbing it in its yellowed eye. The fight with the concept art guy also sounds strange and beautiful, as you battle this figure atop a hill covered in pink flowers and ruined windmills. The player is seen using a variety of spells and skills to fight as the boss casts flames and their body contorts into a snake-like form over the course of the fight. Snake-like. This open field boss drops a site of lost grace atop the hill upon being defeated, meaning we will be fighting for some of our precious checkpoints in Elden Ring's open world, which is awesome. The open world enemy encounters sound great and challenging, and Catal sweetened the pot with this statement to the Washington Post. You'll find some optional encounters that will definitely test the player's mettle, which we've prepared specifically for these players that love a challenge. Souls fans rejoice. Also, another small detail that is grounds for rejoicing, and that I couldn't find a good place to put, ragdoll physics is in, and I can't wait to see enemy corpses fling about as I ride my spirit steed over them. And with that, let's talk about the spirit steed, which we learned more about in the demo. You can summon your mount anytime out in the open world when you're not co-oping or summoning. Summoning is very smooth, to the point where you can do it while running and as part of your battle strategy according to Extra Life. You can swing your weapon, fire a bow, and cast spells while mounted. Kitao indicated that you might prefer to fight on horseback against larger foes for hit and run, and dismount for multiple enemies. The horse handling is described as arcadey and very one-to-one with the player, which is great news. I personally prefer a mount to handle tightly so that I can move and fight easily instead of wrestling with wide turning arcs. The Spirit Steed can move fast, double jump, and use jump pads seen in the gameplay trailer to easily get around the world. It also sounds like the steed will be used for storage, with multiple impressions noting that saddlebags changed over the course of the demo. The Verge also learned that you will be able to interact with your mount to a limited degree. Kitao told him, "You will be able to do small interactions, such as feeding it to regain its health and small things like this. Hopefully through this, the player will be able to form a small attachment." The final topic about the open world, and one that I'm personally very happy about, but could be somewhat controversial in the community, is the map. There is a map in Elden Ring. It features no words and has a hand-drawn appearance. You do not have the whole map, and need to collect map fragments out in the world to further fill it out. You can place symbols on the map marking locations to revisit, as well as place markers. These markers will appear in the game as a beam of light in the sky, similar to Breath of the Wild. The map is also where you can fast travel to sites of lost grace. Vadi also noted in his impressions that the map features an ocean with what appeared to be a path on it, indicating there may be some sea voyaging in Elden Ring. There's also another layer to the map that was not shown, which displays the subterranean labyrinth, indicating the map may feature multiple layers. There was also a compass mentioned in the Eurogamer article, and Vadi was kind enough to tell me that after marking and exiting the map, a compass appears to help orient players and show the direction of the markers. Before wrapping up the open world, I wanted to highlight a few miscellaneous tidbits learned from the impressions. The first is about the aesthetic of the open world. Kitao told Eurogamer regarding the increased use of color and beauty that this aesthetic definitely came into play when designing that overworld. When traversing this vast landscape, if it was always going to be dark and dreary, it might play on your motivation a little bit. So we wanted to keep in mind these beautiful vistas and sunsets. These old heroes that lived in the world before the events of the game take place, many of the designed castles and cities were for them, and they lived in very luxurious, glamorous surroundings, and a lot of that will be preserved in the world that the player explores. Some of the vistas we can look forward to exploring are wintry plains, snow-capped peaks, a flooded city, and a decrepit swamp. In a stream talking about the demo, GameSpot's Timur Hussein spoke about multiple golden trees, which you can make out somewhat in this image. He spoke about a foggy valley with a load of gravestones and golden trees on either side of the valley. He clarified that while these were also golden trees, they were much smaller in scale than the Erd tree. And finally, The Verge mentioned a fight with an oversized falcon with swords affixed to its talons that pecked and sliced at the player while also throwing powder kegs at them. Man, the enemy designs in this game are on point. There are 6 main dungeons in Elden Ring called Legacy Dungeons, and they are home to the demigod lords who have taken the great runes, shards of the Elden Ring. These are self-contained zones roughly the size of an area in the Souls games, and feature a similar structure of multiple winding paths and shortcuts to progress through the area. There are no maps for these dungeons, and you cannot ride your mount while inside them. In the demo, segments of Stormvale Castle were featured. This is likely the first Legacy dungeon most players will play through, but it was confirmed there are multiple Legacy dungeons the player can travel to from the start. At the entrance to Stormvale Castle, the player met with an NPC in a white robe wearing a book as a necklace, who warns them that the main gate is guarded and that the player should take a secret side path. The player is then given the option to ask the gate to be opened or to take the side path. The player chooses the main gate, and after it opens and the player enters, they're met by a troll, soldiers, and ballista firing on them. At this point, they choose to retreat and choose the side path, and here is where the dedicated jump button shines. The player takes thin winding paths and leaps from platform to platform as they make their way along the castle. The Washington Post describes seeing multiple hidden routes and architecture that hints at secrets and treasure off the beaten path. Eventually, this side path leads them behind the castle's army, and the player slips past them through a golden fog gate, at which point in the demo Godric the Golden, the boss of Stormvale Castle, is shown off. Godric is described in the impressions as hulking and very aggressive, and Fextra Life likens his aggression to that of Gale from Dark Souls 3. Like we saw in the gameplay trailer, he swings at you with his axes, and then later in the fight uses the head of a wyvern to shoot fire and even grab the player and chomp down on them. It is also confirmed that the boss music is banging. There was an NPC summoned by the player to help, and here is Fextra Life's description. Our champion tried to fight back by summoning what I can only describe as Onion Bro's long-lost evil cousin, Pumpkin Bro, who had an enormous pumpkin head and a flail. I thought that it might be the flail guy in this image, but again, Vaudi was nice enough to confirm for me that the summon was akin to a large ogre and very tanky. Before moving on to smaller dungeons, I want to spend a quick moment to discuss the design approach of Fromsoftware. Miyazaki is known to give artists keywords to describe enemies and then let them get creative and come back with drawings inspired by those keywords. In speaking with The Verge, Kitao said that one example is the demigods, the boss characters in the game. The keywords for them were old heroes from the lands between, so we wanted them to have this heroic and majestic quality. I just really love this collaborative approach, and based upon Godric, I can't wait to see the other majestic monstrosities From has come up with for the Legacy Dungeons. In addition to the Legacy Dungeons, there are also smaller dungeons accessible around the open world. These small dungeons will vary between caves, cemeteries, catacombs, and ruins around the world. They are handcrafted, not procedurally generated like chalices, according to Polygon. Like the Legacies, you cannot use your Steed inside them and will follow the more classic level design of Fromsoftware. These smaller dungeons contain enemies to fight, traps to avoid, treasure to collect, and illusory walls to open. The impressions describe the brief segments inside these smaller dungeons as being similar to Sen's Fortress in design. They weren't heavily featured in the demo, but sound to me like shrines from Breath of the Wild or enemy camps from Ghost of Tsushima. It will be a small challenge that will net your character loot and experience. Speaking of loot and experience, let's talk about your character in Elden Ring and what we've learned from the demo impressions. Kitao told Eurogamer that with Elden Ring, building your character, we hope it will evoke a sense of the good old-fashioned RPG genre. That means character creation and class selection are back. Like the Souls games, it sounded like class selection will simply be a starting point for your character, and that you can allocate stats and equip them as you like throughout the game. Stats will be similar to the Souls games with some additional stats unique to Elden Ring. Kitao confirmed agility will be coming back, but that it may function differently. Strength of course is returning, but Kitao mentioned that strength will now affect the maximum equip load of your character. Equip weight will once again affect your role in Elden Ring. It is unconfirmed if equip load affects stealth or jumping. Extra Life explained that parry, riposte, and backstab are all very much the same and look like they did in Dark Souls 3. There is also a new guard counterattack system where blocking with a weapon lets you respond with a special counterattack. In addition to the classic Dark Souls elements, a dedicated jump button has been added as previously mentioned, and that you can attack and use a bow in midair like Sekiro. Also similar to Sekiro, there's a light stealth system that lets you perform backstabs. And also what is being described as a stance system that is similar to posture in Sekiro. There was no HUD in the gameplay demo, but after heavy attacks and jumping attacks, enemies would be stunned, opening them up to what was described as similar to a visceral attack, dealing tons of damage. Extra Life described the combat of Elden Ring as, take Dark Souls 3, start there, add a jump, add stealth mechanics, and add a light posture system from Sekiro. In addition to crouching and hiding behind tall grass, there were sleep arrows the player could use to knock out enemies to perform critical attacks or simply sneak away from them. Should you not come out victorious, it was confirmed that when you die in Elden Ring, you leave a blood stain behind like in Dark Souls, where your collected runes, which are Elden Ring's experience and currency item, drop and must be retrieved without dying again. Also interesting to note is that it does not cost stamina to sprint outside of combat, allowing the player to jog the lands between until they engage. Now let's talk weapons, armor, magic, and skills. There will be more weapons and armors than previous games according to Kitao. Weapons shown in the demo were twin blades, daggers, swords, long swords, great swords, curved swords, staves, bows, axes, spears, halberds, scythes, whips, small, medium, and great shields, and a jousting lance. Game Informer asked Kitao about the Moonlight Greatsword, to which he responded, "Well, it didn't show up in Sekiro, so it has to show up sooner or later, right?" For magic, I'd like to read you this quote from Fextralife. "If you are wondering what you can expect for your magic arsenal, we saw several pyromancies including Fireball and a long and improved version of Firestorm. We also recognized several weapon buff effects that were glowing blue and yellow, hinting to magic and lightning effects. We saw a fluid and beautiful version of Soul Darts, magic-based Soul Rain cast that created a magical storm that precipitated soul arrows down on the area, a ginormous version of Magic Greatsword, a light-colored AoE of frontal scythes, and a particularly awesome frontal AoE magic that summoned lightning and seemed to cause the earth to tremor in its conal wake. Weapon skills are also returning from Dark Souls 3, but the system has been overhauled. There will be over 100 skills that are now found out in the world, and can be attached to and removed from weapons at Lost Graces. We saw a few returning skills in the gameplay trailer such as Spin Slash, Quick Step, and Quick Fire. In the gameplay demo there was a Wind Blast shown, a Lightning Strike skill, and a magical Greatsword Slash. Magic, skill, and spirit summons all use focus points, or FP, which is making a return from Dark Souls 3. Speaking of spirit summons, we learned more about the system in the gameplay demo. After beating some enemies, you get Deceased Ashes, which lets you summon the enemy as an ally using FP when you are near one of these obelisks. Spirit summons will serve a variety of roles, from tanks to distractions. During the demo, Game Informer said that they saw trolls, orcs, and goblins all summoned. In the case of the goblins, it was a whole swarm which are summoned, so there will be a lot of variety in how these spirit summons function. You can choose which summons will be available to you at Lost Graces, where you can also make spirit summons more powerful by leveling them up. It is worth noting that you can only use the spirit summons when you're by yourself, not in co-op. Fextralife asked about the Pot Boys as a spirit summon, to which Kitao responded, "The Pot Boys. We hope that players can explore and find their own answers in regards to the Pot People. You are free to befriend them if you wish, but we can't promise you that you won't have to smash them." We learned more about the multiplayer systems of Elden Ring. For co-op, players will put down summon signs like in Souls games, and players can summon up to 2 co-op partners. You will be able to be in a password group with friends so that you only see your friends' bloodstains and messages. As mentioned previously, you cannot ride your steed while co-oping. However, you can be invaded. Invaders will only be able to invade the world of those engaged in co-op, but Kitao did stress this system was still being developed. Also still in development are covenants and their mechanics, but Kitao did say they will function much like they do in the Souls games. And finally, it was confirmed that gestures will be returning in Elden Ring, and that hurrah, joy, applause, and deep respect were all seen in the demo according to Fextralife. And that is what we know about the gameplay and mechanics of Elden Ring so far. I'm hoping and hopeful that we will get to see a version of this gameplay demo soon, because it sounds incredible. I love reading these impressions, but I can't wait to see it with my own eyes. And speaking of my eyes, they are looking at the recently released images that came out alongside these impressions, and you can look forward to a deep dive into those screenshots coming out on the channel soon. So what do you think about all this information? Let me know in the comments. If you learned something new or generally appreciated this video, please consider giving a like and subscribing if you'd like even more Elden Ring goodness. All of your interaction helps get more attention on my content. Thanks for watching.